and one of my favorite songs. And welcome everybody. And I see some special friends, and I guess I have to remember that I'm talking to friends. And I'm glad that I could share my favorite story. And I have a lot of favorite stories, but this one, I'm reminded, some of you, who's here that went to Nicaragua? Okay. No, on our mission trip, not you folks that used to live there. Well, okay, so I can tell the same stories and nobody's going to, question. When I was thinking about what story to tell, this person came to my mind, and I said, it's got to be that, but how could I possibly put all the little details together? And then I started thinking, I did this once before. I don't have to recreate the wheel, but where's my notes? And I got up one morning and, I was, really trying to figure this out. And I opened the drawer where I study my lesson, and there were my notes. And I pulled them out, and I said, oh, yes, okay, I can do it over again. And so I'm going to be sharing about a story of a person his great-grandfather was Abraham. You can try to guess. His grandfather was Isaac, and his father was Jacob. And he had a coat of many colors. This is the best I could come up with. You know who I'm going to talk to you about? Joseph. I'm going to start out with my own journey into adulthood. Back in 1963, and some of you weren't born. Were you born then? No. Some of us were. I was 20 years old, and I was going off to college. Now, that seems pretty normal, but in my day, in my life, it was a big step. I was a little country bumpkin, and, I always compare notes with George. I'm sorry, when I went off to college, I didn't have to wear shoes for the first time. And I'm a little country bumpkin, and I'm going off to college. And I was excited because someone told me that that's where you go to get a man. And really, all I wanted was to get married and have a family. That was my dream. And I got stuck with a college degree and no man, except later. And I always tell Dick, okay, I'll try to go easy on you, not too many stories, because that's it, okay? And so I packed my meager bags. I didn't have many clothes. That was bothering me. I did have a pair of 3-inch spikes. That's as high as they got in that day. One pair of nice shoes. And I head off to Pacific Union College. And it's like going to New York City from here to me. My father had died early. My mother didn't drive. We didn't go many places. And some of these stories maybe you heard before because when I've been up here, but many of you haven't. So I got to tell them again, okay? And so we milked the cow. We made butter from the cream. We gathered eggs. We had a big garden. We gathered fruits and nuts and put them away. And it was a simple life. Most of the time it was pretty good, but there were times when it was hard, and most of it involved my mother. Because I'd have to say, my mother kind of showed a little favoritism to the 5 brothers. Boys don't do dishes. Their hands would get too soft. And I, being an outdoor person, would prefer being outside. And when I would come into the house and my mother is there, and it's like she had a big hand. And she made me realize that I should have been in there doing the dishes. So I go off to PUC remembering home, but excited about my experience there in college. But I get up there, and it's scary. I didn't know anybody. A lot of the girls knew each other in Academy. And one of the things that really was harsh was they put about 30 of us women in the rec room because the dorm wasn't finished. You know about dorms, right? And so we had partitions. And because everybody else seemed to know each other, I'm sitting there at night crying myself to sleep. I was really lonesome. I was a long ways from home, and I couldn't just head back home, and my mother couldn't come up to see me, and I wouldn't want to see her anyway. But it was a tough time, and I know what it's like to be lonely. Do you know what it's like to be lonely? All of us have probably experienced that one time or another. Well, you know who I'm talking about, Joseph, okay? I was 20 in 1963, starting on my journey to adulthood. He's 17, and he's on his first leg of his journey to becoming an adult. What a story, huh? You know a lot of the story, but as I started preparing for this, I said, I got to dig into this. I got to get what was really going on. And so I hope I can share some of that. And Joseph, at 17, his dad says, okay, go check on your brothers. And Joseph said, oh, yeah, I like to see what they're up to and come back and tell Daddy. He was known as a tattler. And this time he sets out. He's got a donkey. He's got all the goodies from home, fresh bread and cheese and dates and figs. And he's going to take them to his brothers, and he's thinking, oh, they're going to love to see me. And he goes looking for his brothers, and he ends up 50 miles north in Shechem. Now, some of you know the horror that happened in Shechem. Jacob was devastated what his sons Simeon and Levi had done, killed Shechem and all the people. And so they left and they went south. And so here's Joseph, and he's traveling along, and he's pretty tired, 50 miles and hauling a donkey. I've tried hauling my donkeys. They don't always want to follow. And so he finds out where his brothers are, and he heads over. And he's walking along, and, I wish I could get there, And he looks over, and, that's them. There they are. That's my brothers. And he starts hurrying up, and he's so anxious to get there, and he's got a big grin on his face, and he knows that they're just going to be so happy to see him. And as he gets closer, and the brothers over there, hey, here he comes. Hide that skin over there. He's going to tell Dad that we killed one of his little lambs. They started thinking and building up and getting angry to the place where they got into a rage. And when Joseph comes close, he's thinking, I better get out of here. But it's a little late. And he tries to, okay, brothers, I brought you some good stuff to eat. So they grab the donkey, and they're, give us the food. And you little dreamer, tattletale. And one of the brothers says, he's not getting my inheritance. So Daddy has made him the favorite. He's not getting my inheritance. Let's do to him what we did to Shechem. That was Simeon and Levi. And Reuben, oldest brother Reuben, said, oh, now come on, you guys, let's not shed any blood, And so as Joseph gets into the camp, what do? They are really in a frenzy. I mean, this is not just a little bit of anger. And they grab him, and they pull off his coat of many colors, which they hated. And sometimes Joseph wondered, should Dad had really got that for me and not for the others? And the other brother, yeah, we got shabby chic shepherd's garb. They grab Joseph, and Reuben says, well, put him in this pit. There's a pit over here. It's dry. Put him in there, and we'll figure out what we're going to do. And Reuben goes off, and I think he's thinking, Dad, my father, I have to bring Joseph back. I mean, he lost his precious Rachel. He can't lose Joseph. And so he's thinking, he says to himself, I'll just come back and I'll get Joseph out of the pit and I'll take him back to Dad. You know, none of this, these brothers, they're really besides themselves. I don't understand it quite, but Dad did spoil him, and I'm supposed to be the one to get the inheritance. All these things going through their minds. And lo and behold, some cousins, the Ishmaelites, you know, there's the Isaacites and there's the Ishmaelites. And they're coming along and they've got a caravan of camels with wares. And the brothers ask him, you know, what's going on? And there's a string of persons with shackles and chains and all following behind. Where are you headed? Oh, we're on our way to Egypt. We're going to sell our wares, and we got these slaves, and we'll make some money. And they're saying, want another one? And before you know it, Joseph is drug out of the hole. He's put in shackles, a chain around his waist attached to a group of other people. In that day, being a slave was almost worse than death, is what they believed. And here's Joseph, and he's saying, God, are you with me? What's going on here? I don't understand. Why do my brothers hate me so? You know, it's not my fault. My dad shouldn't have been so played favorite with me. And all he can do is think and walk and trudge along. And he's gone a few days, and he looks out. That's my father's tents. He's going past. Oh, Father, can you come and get me? Oh, I mean, he would love to scream out, but he can't. And he can't run. Oh, you got to send somebody, Father. Oh, Benjamin, my little brother, I'd love to put my arms around you. And they travel on past, and Joseph is devastated. And he keeps saying, God, are you there? You know, I remember the story my father told me. My father was fleeing from his brother Esau. You know, my father was deceptive. And that's where my brothers get their deception. And so he, all right, where was I?
On your way to Egypt.
On the way to Egypt. Yeah, well, we'll pick up on the story there. You get up here and you find out that I look around and I see a smiling face, and that's distracting. And so Joseph is headed down. Oh, okay. And Jacob had that dream. And you know the story when you're a child, that Jacob's ladder and the angels coming up and down, and Father Jacob was assured that you were always going to be with him. And then, when my father was coming back, again, my father said he actually wrestled with you. And he said, I will not let you go until you bless me. well, God, are you going with me? You know, I'm going to run away someday and I'm going to go back home, but right now I can't get away. And the blood and from these shackles, and my mouth is dry, it's cold at night and it's hot during the day. And Joseph is thinking and trotting 300 miles. How long did that take him? Them? If they went 20 miles a day, you know, we're talking weeks, several weeks. Quite a journey. Joseph's first journey into adulthood was not a very pleasant experience. Mine turned out to be pleasant. I made friends. I was shy at first. You wouldn't know that now. And so as Joseph is getting near Egypt, and he's like, oh, it's a huge city. It's the world empire at that time. He can't believe what he's seeing. All the stone buildings and the temples and those pyramid-shaped things. What are those? And he found out that's where they buried their kings. And they didn't speak his language. So here's Joseph. He doesn't understand a word they're saying. And he's got to kind of surmise. And before you know it, he's placed on an auction block and he's sold. And as luck would have it, as some people might say, Joseph was sold to a good man, Potiphar. At least it seems to be. And Joseph is in his employ. And Joseph says, he's good to me. I'm going to be good to him. My father was good to his servants. That's the least I can do, is be a good servant. And someday I'm going to get out of here. I've got to get back home. I miss my father and I miss my brother. 10 years he's in the employ of Potiphar. And things are going good until Mrs. Potiphar comes onto the scene. And you know what her problem was? She had servants to cook all her meals. She had servants to clean the house. She had servants to do the garden work, which I would have been out doing garden work. She had somebody to brush her hair, somebody to clean her clothes. She had nothing to do. And there's a lesson there. Kids, that's why we keep you busy as parents. You don't want to get into mischief. You got to keep busy. And so Mrs. Potiphar, day after day, she's seeing this handsome, well-built young man. And she says, hey, Potiphar's gone. He's traveling. Come to bed with me. And Joseph's like, no. Over and over again, Joseph says no. Now, who was there to check up on him? He could have said, oh God, yeah, you sent me down here. Okay, I've got to obey my mistress. And the one day, everybody else was out of the house except Mrs. Potiphar and Joseph. And here she is again. And she goes over and she says, Joseph, come to bed with me. And she grabs him by his coat and he lets it go. And here she is, help, help. And all the servants come running in. And Potiphar comes back and she says, that Hebrew slave you gave me, do you know what he did? Now, Potiphar put him in prison, but did Potiphar really believe that Joseph would have done that? 10 years, Joseph was in control of Potiphar's whole house. managed his money. Did Joseph ever give any indication that he could have done something like that? Potiphar says no, but I got to save face, the servants and, my wife. And so he throws Joseph into prison. And Joseph's on his second journey into adulthood. And he goes into the prison, he proves himself, and he is made the overseer in the prison. I mean, he proved himself again. And he says, God, I'm stuck here, but I know you're with me. Now, when you think about it, Joseph didn't have the Bible and the stories, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, did God remove them out of did he keep them from going into the furnace? No. But what did he do? Here, 3 men and one like the Son of God, and he went in the furnace with them. Does God always take care of our struggles and remove our problems? But what does he do? He promises to be in there with us. That's pretty awesome. And Joseph is thinking along those lines. God, I know you're with me, but what about those dreams I had? Because they believed in dreams. Well, up comes a couple of the fellow inmates that Joseph was in control of, and they said, we had some dreams. Can you interpret them for us? Well, tell me the dreams, and God will interpret them for you. And so, you know the story of the butler, his dream, 3 days, he was gone. And the cupbearer in 3 days, no, he was restored to the palace. And you know what the cupbearer is. You want to make sure you don't get some poison put in your cup. So the cupbearer has to sip it first. And the king sits there, you going to make it? And then he gives the cup to the king. So before the cupbearer left the prison, Joseph had said, remember me? I'd like to get out of here. Would you remember me? You're going to be in there with Pharaoh. I want out of here. Tell him good things. And of course, did he remember? He's just about his own business, having a good time sharing the cup. What a job, huh? And so then what happened? You know the rest of the story? And so Pharaoh has a dream, and he has one on top of that, and he's very disturbed. Dreams meant something. Now, I had one last night. I can't even remember it. Pharaoh remembered this dream and then the one on top of it. And he says, I'm really upset. You wise men, you magicians, come in here. Tell me, what does this dream mean? And they go, we don't know. We'll talk to the gods. The gods will give you the interpretation. The cupbearer. Oh, King, I remember. There was a man in prison that could interpret dreams. Well, go get him. So they go in and get Joseph, and what does he think when they're coming for him? It's my time is up. They come and get him, and they bring him into the palace, and they clean him up, cut his hair, and trim his beard, and put new clothes and new sandals. He's back to handsome, young man. He's only about 27 years old or thereabouts. And the king, Pharaoh, tells him the dream. And the king says, I understand you can interpret dreams. And Joseph says, not me. It's my God. And the Pharaoh is thinking, oh, yeah, I got lots of gods. And yeah, they're supposed to. Your God, huh? Can he interpret? And so the dream is explained to Joseph, and the interpretation is given. And Joseph says, well, you need to find a discerning, wise man that can save up all the grain and the food, because there's going to be this 7 years of good stuff, rain and lots of crops, and then there's going to be 7 years of no crops, and you need to have a person in charge to go around and save all the grain up. And the Pharaoh, and I kind of surmise that Pharaoh was young because he called Joseph his father. So he had to be a young man, perhaps. And so he says, you're the one. You're a discerning, wise man. And you know the story. He gets the ring put on his finger. He gets his own chariot. He gets a wife. And he ends up having a couple children. The famine comes, and all the people start coming to Egypt. And Joseph is thinking, they're coming from up north where my family is. I wonder, is my family going to come down? And so Joseph every day is looking for his family. Will my father come? Benjamin, I'd love to see Benjamin. And he looks, and finally he sees a group of ragtag men, and he counts them. There's 10 of them. And he says, that's got to be my brothers. And so Joseph sets about like a mouse and a cat. He tests his brothers. I got to see what they're really like anymore. Have they grown up to be good men? And he tests them, all these different things that he does to find out, yes, my brothers are good now, especially Judah, when he offered his place for Benjamin. And so the most incredible story from here on out, I have my Bible here. And you know, you can read this. Go home and read the story. It's a long one, but it is the most emotional story in the whole Bible. It comes to life when, and if you want to follow along, this is Genesis 45, chapter 45. Joseph finally, after he's proved his brothers, he just can't wait to disclose who he is to his brothers. He wants to go up because in the meantime, Benjamin was brought down, and he wants to hug his brother Benjamin, his little brother that was now an adult. And finally, verse 1, 45, then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he said, have everyone leave. Get out of here. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly. Can you imagine the emotions of all those years? Finally, God is proving himself all the time. He was with me. Pharaoh hears him. He is wailing. And he wept so loudly, the Egyptians heard him. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. And can you imagine what went through their minds at this time? Uh-oh, it's payback. Look what we did to him. He's going to get us. He's going to make us slave. They were terrified. That's what it says here. And he wept so loudly. Is my father still alive? He wants to see his father. That's the longing all the time when Joseph was in Potiphar's palace, when he was in the prison, and as he's saving up, he's had this longing. Something is missing. My family, I want my family. He never was at rest, at peace, because of what had happened. And he goes on to say, do not be distressed. And they go, phew. And do not be angry with yourselves for selling me, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. Joseph got it. The dreams were fulfilled. God, it's your fault, God. Can't blame my brothers. It was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. And then he says, bring my father down here. Go get my father. Hurry. Now, this is 150 miles. How long would it take to go get his father with wagons and bring the whole family? I mean, there was 60 some odd family members that came back. Can you imagine the reunion when Joseph hears that his father has arrived? And so he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin embraced him weeping, and he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. And imagine when he was there with his arms around his father, how long did they weep and rejoice? And this is it. This, all that I went through, Joseph is thinking, it's worth it. My father's been restored. Everything is back to where it should be. And you know, if we look at the story of Joseph, there's a lot of lessons. And I had told some of the young people out of there, out in the back, I said, I need you in here because you need to hear that when you're young, God wants you. Well, he wants everybody. But when you're young, he would love to start with you. And he promises to be with you. He doesn't promise to take you out of the problems. Sometimes he does. But he promises to be there with you when you're going through stuff. And you just need to connect with him. And if you connect with him, praying, talking to him, reading his words, which Joseph didn't have, and look at what we have, the blessing of all these stories that we can learn from. And this one verse that was read earlier, Jeremiah, this has to be my favorite verse, and maybe it's yours too. Jeremiah, one of the later prophets, Jeremiah 29. Do you know this one? For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Is there anything better than that promise? God will be with us through whatever we're going through. And the neat thing is that God has a purpose for us. We're not here just for us. We're here to fulfill the plan that God has for us, but we got to stay close.